Move against the Jedi first. You will then have no difficulty in taking the Queen to Naboo to sign the treaty.
At last we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi. At last we will have revenge.
You have been well trained, my young apprentice.
Hey there kids, welcome back. David from Atomic Candy, and right now I am open by chance, and what I am opening up with for you here today is the Tamashii Nations Darth Maul. Tamashii Nations, which is manufactured by Bandai. It is a series from Bandai, and it is called the Movie Realization Series. And what they essentially do in the Tamashii Nations line is take a character and give it a medieval Japanese look, which is what they've done here with Darth Maul. And these are for the money because they are not cheap. The Tamashii Nations figures, which primarily so far they've only done Star Wars and Marvel characters, and this is part of the Star Wars line, which is their biggest line, are quite expensive. You see the $90 price tag there. In the US, the best place to find these is Barnes & Noble. Barnes & Noble has these. They turn up really cheap on eBay. Be very careful because most of them are counterfeits. If you're not buying them from a licensed dealer or from someone who's just selling one that they had aftermarket, for example, like somebody has one, they decide they don't want it anymore, and you go ahead and you get the one that says it's being shipped from Hong Kong for 20 bucks, you're going to get a $20 figure. So be very careful. Now, this is the Sohei Darth Maul, and they like to give them traditional medieval Japanese names, and Sohei, roughly translated, means monk warrior or fighting monk. That's what a Sohei is. A monk warrior or a fighting monk. In medieval Japan, there was a caste of Buddhist warrior monks who were actually very powerful, not only physically but politically. So that's a really good term to use on our Darth Maul figure. And this one, the seal is already broken, so I'm going to go ahead and open this up. Now, as you may know, I am primarily an in-the-box collector, but when it comes to stuff like this that can be opened and then resealed, I don't have a problem opening it up. And usually you'll see a quote from Star Wars inside these boxes. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Infamous words now. Infamous words. I saw Star Wars, the original Star Wars, in the theater in 1977. These all come with a set of instructions that shows you basic hand to wrist placement. This one has a mask placement, tells you how to put the sword together. There is a little tiny peg with this, and it says, do not misplace. No kidding, because you'll never find it again. A bunch of instructions in a language you can't read, and that's pretty much it. But they all have a little piece of paperwork with them. And then there's our Darth Maul. Clamshell packaging. And there'll be nothing underneath. It's this shell, and if I pull this all the way out of the cardboard, you'll see there's nothing in there. It's an empty box. But it's a solid box. It's a good solid box. The figure is just short of 8 inches tall. He's about 7 3/4 inches tall. You've got the primary figure. He's wearing beaded prayer necklace, which is removable. He's got a mask, the double swords, the joint for the sword, which is already attached, I believe, on one of these ends, and 4 extra hands. So I believe he's got the fist hands already in, and then you've got gripping hands and then more open dynamic hands. And I'm going to go ahead and lift the clamshell off, and we're going to take a look at what we've got inside here. Let's take a better look at him. And I will stand him up and pose him for you as well. I don't want to lean this too far forward because pieces will fall out of these. As you already saw, the mask started to come loose. And just like how I have an affinity for Mezco 1/12 collective figures, because they are fantastic middle-of-the-road, high-end collectible action figures if you can't afford to or are not prepared to jump off into 1/6 scale collecting, and you're into the 1/12 sort of collecting. Even though they're expensive, you know, Mezco 1/12 and Tamashii Nation figures are expensive by comparison, around $80–90 a piece. You're not going to find higher quality figures in that size. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and take him out of the packaging and stand him up, and we'll take a really close look at him and the accessories and at his articulation. And we are back with our Darth Maul figure. And these are not mixed media. They are not mixed media like the Mezco 1/12s. The Mezco 1/12 collective figures are all mixed media figures, but the detail and the posability on these is fantastic. Look at that face. Look at the work that went into Darth Maul there. Darth Maul, who of course is a Dathomirian Zabrak. That is the species from the Star Wars universe. Dathomirian Zabrak is where he comes from. And he, of course, was the apprentice to Darth Sidious, the Emperor. See how he has the tabi boots? And a tabi boot, of course, is a boot that has the split toe, which is very Japanese traditional. Lot of detail, very medieval, has a very Japanese medieval vibe to it, which is why I like these. I like the Star Wars and the Marvel Studios versions that they have done, and I actually have figures from both collections. This is the first time I'm sharing these with all of you. Take a close-up at some of the accessories. There's his beads. I took them off so that you can get a better look at those and at the figure. And it's a solid piece of basically rubber. You hang those around his neck. The mask, which fits over the front of his face. Very detailed mask here. I like the mask. The double swords, double lightsaber swords in translucent red. So they do appear to be like energy swords. And I'll show you a close-up of the handle. And there is the peg that they warn you not to misplace. Don't lose that peg, you'll be sorry. That connects the two swords together. Ray Park was the actor who played Darth Sidious in The Phantom Menace. Phantom Menace, of course, being the first of the prequel series. There's our instructions again. Actually, let's take another look. Let's look on the side of Darth Maul here up close. Ray Parks, who really wasn't an actor. George Lucas wasn't interested in an actor so much as someone who was just a fantastic swordsman. And indeed, a movie that really wasn't too popular with Star Wars fans, Phantom Menace, particularly because of Jar Jar Binks, who almost ruined the film. The best scenes are with Darth Maul, who barely spoke He barely spoke in the movie. But he was a fantastic swordsman, and that's what George Lucas wanted. And that was really him. Sword fighting. There was no stunt double. The other two actors playing, of course, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn were stunt doubles, and they used CGI to superimpose the actors' faces over the two swordsmen who were sparring with Ray Parks, who they fought so intensely. Even though they were sparring, they weren't trying to hurt each other, but they fought so intensely that they were constantly damaging the props. They were using like iron rods that were removed and replaced with lightsabers, and they were bending them because they were going at it so hard. So Ray Parks was a fantastic swordsman, and that's what they were looking for. And it paid off. It paid off because he makes for some of the best scenes. As a matter of fact, he was so popular that they rewrote his death. Because as you know, Obi-Wan cuts him down in The Phantom Menace. Slices him in half, actually. But he does come back. You do see him again in Clone Wars and in the Star Wars Rebels series. Oh, I didn't show you his hands. Let me go back here a little bit. And also he made an appearance in the new Solo movie. Solo, a Star Wars story. It's a pair of gripping hands. Turn those around so you can see. Gripping hands for holding the swords. And grasping hands for looking menacing. And it's good quality construction. And I'm going to turn him around here and I'm going to show you his articulation. Again, the one drawback is that it's not mixed media, and I almost wish that it was, just because I like the mixed media on the 1/12 collective figures. But let's take a look at his articulation. The head and neck movement works really well, but you can hear it creaking because, of course, it is all plastic. Shoulder and elbow articulation, wrists. Some of the sculpting, because they're making it look like he has a flowing robes, does obstruct it a little bit. But you still have good movement. These panels that he has on his shoulders, they do come out. They do pop off. They're just on this little, like, sort of a pivot, if you see there. So they can come off. Watch out for that. He does have torso movement and hip and thigh movement, a lot considering, but once again, you see how they gave it a split there so you can bring the leg back, because once again the plastic, and that's one of the few drawbacks to me about this figure, is that these bits that they've attached offer some obstruction to movement. Take a look at his knee articulation, is actually pretty good. Good pivot and turn. Good movement on the ankles as well. So overall, still a fairly decent figure as far as posing is concerned. And speaking of posing, why don't we get him posed and see how that looks? And we are back, and I have our Darth Maul confronting Jack Swagger. Jack Swagger, who is barely posable. I mean, there's a lot of articulation to these wrestling figures, and I used these figures because they're comparable in size. They're both about 7 3/4 inches tall. But you see how his hips are? That's as far as I could turn the hips, and that's as far as I could bend the knees. So posing him, not so easy. Posing Maul, on the other hand, I was able to get him into a very dynamic looking pose that I'm happy with. I had some trouble with the hand. The hand was a little stiff. Getting the wrist to accept the change of hands, because that's the gripping hand, I took the fists off and I put the grasping hand on one side and the gripping hand on the other. And they struggled a little bit to get on. I got them on safely, but I will warn you again, same with the Tamashii Nations as with Hot Toys or Mezco 112 collective figures or whatever you're collecting. If the wrist joint feels like it's not going to go on, stop what you're doing, because it will break. I've known a lot of people to complain that they accidentally broke the wrist joint on a figure, and whereas 1/6 scale figures, you can find replacements. Whoops, don't you do that, Maul. Let me adjust his forward foot here. Whereas with 1/6 scale collective figures, you can find replacements for like broken wrist joints and such. You're not going to do that with these smaller figures. There are no replacements. Come around really nicely there. I just don't want them to fall forward. But yeah, Maul looks fantastic. I really like this series. I like the Star Wars series. It's kind of hard to keep up with. Not because they make so many of them. They really only put out like 2 or 3 a year. I mean, it's not that much. As a matter of fact, as of the time of producing this particular video, the only one that is set for production from the Star Wars line is a C-3PO done in the traditional medieval samurai or medieval feudal Japan stylized look. A C-3PO, which is actually a really cool looking figure. I've seen it. And from Marvel, I believe they have a black suit Spider-Man coming out, which I don't know. I'll probably get it. I have the red suit Spider-Man, but that just kind of disturbs me a little bit, because whenever it's like red suit Spider-Man and then black suit Spider-Man comes out, and this is with any of these figures, it's the same figure, only it's painted black. And I'm like, do I really need that? Do I really need that? Well, it'd be cool to have. I may end up getting it. Let's just imagine that Jack Swagger's been defeated here, so that we can get a better look at Darth Maul, because he's much more interesting. These pose well. These look really good. They're easy to keep stored because of the way the boxes are done. They're a good value for the money for the $90 price tag. About $80 to $90 is what you're going to pay for this, same as with the Mezco 112 collective figures, which, as I pointed out many times, are a great sort of middle of the road figures to collect for if you just aren't able to jump way off into 1/6 scale land, because that's where it starts getting real expensive. You know, for the price of 3 of these, you can get a 1/6 scale figure new, or 4, depending upon which figure you're looking at. It can get very expensive. Again, the only drawbacks for me with this is that it's not mixed media. I'd like to see them do these in mixed media. The other thing is the sheer number of counterfeits. Since this is produced and sold in Asia, from Asia, Japanese company Bandai, but Hong Kong and China have a ton of knockoffs of these figures, and you've really got to be careful. US sellers, again, you know, you can find most of the time, you can find these figures at Barnes & Noble. They carry them. And it is with the $90 price tag. However, remember that Barnes & Noble often has coupons and sales. I have very often seen these with a 30% off price tag at Barnes & Noble. and you can use a Barnes & Noble coupon with that, as well as another 10% off if you're a Barnes & Noble member. However, I have not seen the Marvel versions of the Tamashii Nation figures at Barnes & Noble, just the Star Wars. And no, I don't work for Bandai or Barnes & Noble. I'm just sharing the wealth. So in case this is something you're interested in, that's probably the best place you're going to find a deal on an authentic Bandai Tamashii Nations figure. So what do you think of our Darth Maul? I think it's a really cool figure, but I want to know what you think about it. Please feel free to post your thoughts in the comments section down below. Are you interested in Tamashii Nations? Do you have any Tamashii Nations? Do you collect these? What do you think of the figures? I really like this one. I really like this one. Please do give the video a thumbs up if you got anything out of it. I hope you did. Like, share, subscribe, all of that jazz. Check out some of the other videos. I've got a lot of review videos of figures, unboxing videos, hunting videos, and a lot of other stuff. We do a lot of things on this channel, so we hope that you join us, especially if you're new. Take a look at our playlists and take a look at some of our older videos. You may see something that you like, and I hope you do. So, that being said, thanks for watching, and we hope to see you again soon.